It was past midnight, the kind of hour where the world feels asleep and mistakes feel impossible, and the only light in the room came from multiple monitors reflecting lines of code across a silent face. The hacker, sitting alone, believed this was just another routine session, another quiet intrusion that would end like all the others, unnoticed and forgotten. The keyboard clicked softly as commands executed cleanly, access granted without resistance, firewalls folding exactly as expected, everything behaving the way it always did, predictable and obedient, until something happened that didn't belong. The cursor on the screen moved slightly even though his hands were still, just enough to make him pause, just enough to make him stare. His first instinct was to blame fatigue, maybe a muscle twitch, maybe a lag spike, maybe nothing at all. But then a log refreshed on its own, new data appearing without a command, without permission, without explanation. His heart rate climbed as the room suddenly felt smaller, quieter, heavier, the familiar comfort of control slipping away as a single thought formed in his mind, slow and unwanted. What if this system wasn't empty? What if this time he wasn't the only one inside? And before he could react, before he could disconnect or cover his tracks, another process began running in the background, deliberate, patient, intentional. And in that moment, staring at a screen that no longer fully belonged to him, he realized something that every hacker fears but never expects. This time, he wasn't watching the system was watching him. Before that night, he was careful in the way only experienced hackers are. Not reckless, not loud, not chasing attention, just precise and patient. Someone who didn't break into systems to prove a point, but to feel the quiet satisfaction of getting past doors that weren't meant to open. He started the way most do, curious about how things worked, wondering why systems trusted users so easily. Curiosity slowly turning into skill, skill turning into routine, and routine turning into confidence. Over time, hacking stopped feeling dangerous and started feeling normal, almost boring. He knew how to stay hidden, how to mask his trail, how to move without leaving footprints behind. He avoided targets that fought back, avoided chaos, avoided anything that felt unpredictable, because to him, hacking wasn't about thrill, it was about control. Every session followed the same rhythm: scan, enter, observe, exit, clean, disappear. And for a long time, that rhythm never failed him. Every successful breach reinforced the same belief that systems were flawed, people were careless, and he was always a step ahead. The idea of being traced felt theoretical, something that happened to others who rushed or got greedy, not to someone who planned every move, double-checked every action, and never stayed longer than necessary. So when he sat down that night, alone with the glow of his screens, he didn't feel nervous or rushed or unsure. He felt calm, confident, untouchable, because in his mind the rules were simple. If you stayed smart, stayed quiet, and stayed invisible, nothing could ever reach you. And that belief was exactly what made what happened next so terrifying. The target appeared almost by accident, not the result of a long search or a carefully planned hunt, but something he noticed while scanning out of habit. A network sitting quietly where there should have been noise, outdated protections, open ports that looked neglected, defenses that hadn't been patched in far too long. It felt wrong in a subtle way, not dangerous, just unusually simple, like a door left unlocked in a neighborhood where everything else was sealed tight. He paused longer than usual, hovering over the entry point, wondering why something this exposed still existed, why no alarms triggered, why no resistance pushed back. But curiosity did what it always did. It whispered that easy access didn't mean a trap, it meant opportunity. So he moved slowly, testing one layer at a time, expecting at any moment for the system to react, for something to close, for warnings to flare up. But nothing happened. The deeper he went, the more welcoming it felt, permissions opening smoothly, directories revealing themselves without protest, almost as if the system wanted to be explored. And that was the detail that stayed with him, not the lack of security, but the lack of indifference, because systems usually resist or ignore intrusions, but this one seemed aware, responsive, attentive, and as he crossed another threshold without consequence, a thought surfaced that he immediately dismissed: the idea that this network wasn't unprotected because it was abandoned, but because it didn't need to hide. And by the time that realization fully formed, he was already inside, past the point where leaving felt as simple as entering.
At first, it wasn't anything obvious, nothing dramatic or alarming, just tiny inconsistencies that didn't fit the pattern he was used to, commands that executed cleanly but took a fraction of a second longer than they should have, responses that arrived perfectly formatted yet felt delayed like someone had read them before allowing them through. He checked his connection, checked his routing, checked his own tools, assuming the problem was on his end, but everything looked normal, too normal. Then he noticed the logs, updating more frequently than expected, recording actions he hadn't finalized yet, almost predicting what he was about to do. He dismissed it again, telling himself systems behave strangely when they're old or misconfigured, but the feeling didn't go away. It grew heavier with every action. Directories that should have stayed static refreshed on their own. Background processes spiked briefly and then settled, as if something was waking up and going back to sleep. He slowed down, spacing out his inputs, watching closely, waiting for the pattern to break, and that's when it hit him. The system wasn't malfunctioning, it was reacting. Not loudly, not defensively, just enough to let him know it was aware of his presence. And the most unsettling part wasn't that something felt wrong, it was that whatever was wrong seemed patient, observant, and in no hurry to reveal itself. The warning didn't arrive as an alarm or a lockout or anything dramatic. It arrived quietly, almost politely, a file opening on its own in a directory he hadn't touched, the window appearing without a click, without a command, without a mistake to blame. He froze, hands hovering over the keyboard, watching text populate line by line as if someone else was typing from the other side. His first reaction was denial, maybe a delayed process, maybe a cached response finally rendering, but the timing felt deliberate, the cursor blinking steadily, waiting. Then a terminal response appeared beneath it, not an error message, not system noise, but a clean line of output that matched no command he had entered. His breathing slowed as he scrolled back, checking his history, checking timestamps, looking for anything that could explain it, but there was nothing, no trigger, no trace of his input, just a response that existed on its own. And in that moment, the room felt different, not darker, not louder, just closer, as if the distance between him and the system had collapsed. The comforting idea that he was interacting with something passive disappeared, replaced by a new and unsettling certainty. This wasn't a glitch, this wasn't coincidence, this was interaction. And for the first time that night, he wasn't just inside the system, he was part of a conversation he hadn't agreed to start.
The realization didn't hit all at once. It crept in slowly, piece by piece, as he started checking for other active sessions, expecting the scan to come back empty the way it always did. But instead, it returned fragments, traces that didn't belong to him, activity markers without clear origins, processes running under permissions he hadn't granted and couldn't revoke. His confidence cracked as he dug deeper, tracing timestamps that overlapped his own actions, realizing that whatever else was in the system hadn't arrived after him. It had been there already, watching quietly while he moved through familiar paths. He searched for admin presence, for automated monitors, for anything that fit a known explanation. But the patterns didn't match maintenance, didn't match defense protocols, didn't match anything documented or expected. And that's when the thought finally settled in, heavy and undeniable. He wasn't intruding on an empty network. He was entering an occupied space, one where someone else had control, knowledge, and patience. The deeper he looked, the clearer it became that his actions were being observed in real time, not blocked, not challenged, just studied, as if the system was allowing him to roam freely on purpose. And the most unsettling part wasn't that someone else was inside. It was the possibility that they had noticed him the moment he arrived and simply chose to wait, letting him believe he was alone long enough to reveal exactly who he was and how he moved. At first, the pushback was subtle, almost easy to miss. A permission-denied message where access had been granted seconds earlier, a tool failing to load without throwing an error, functions that had worked flawlessly suddenly returning empty results. He tried rerunning commands, switching methods, adjusting parameters, but the system seemed to respond faster each time, adapting, tightening, shrinking his access in real time. It felt less like hitting walls and more like corridors slowly narrowing around him. Processes he relied on began terminating without explanation. Background services he hadn't touched locked themselves. Privileges downgraded silently, methodically, as if someone were adjusting the environment while watching his reactions. He attempted to escalate again, confident that this was just another obstacle, but the response was immediate. Permissions revoked entirely, pathways closing the moment he approached them. And that's when panic started to creep in. Not loud or frantic, just a cold awareness that he was no longer exploring freely. He was being managed, contained within a space that was growing smaller by the second. Every move he made seemed anticipated, every workaround countered before it fully formed, and the truth became impossible to ignore. This system wasn't defending itself out of fear or confusion. It was responding with intent, calm and controlled, like something that had waited long enough and finally decided it was time to stop playing along. The message didn't arrive with a sound or a warning. It simply appeared, a new window opening cleanly at the center of the screen as if it had always belonged there. No alerts triggered, no system flags raised, just a single line of text rendered with perfect clarity. Not rushed, not aggressive, not defensive. His eyes locked onto it instantly because it wasn't formatted like code or automated output. It was written the way a person writes when they know they have time, when they know they're in control. The words were simple, almost casual, yet impossible to misinterpret. They acknowledged his presence without accusing him, confirmed his actions without listing them, and implied awareness without explaining how. He felt his chest tighten as he realized the message wasn't asking who he was or why he was there. It already knew. The tone wasn't threatening, which somehow made it worse. No countdowns, no ultimatums, no demand to leave. Just quiet confirmation that he had been seen from the moment he stepped inside. And as he reread the message, searching for hidden meaning, for weakness, for anything to exploit, another realization settled in. Whoever sent this didn't need to scare him, didn't need to rush him, didn't even need to stop him immediately, because the message itself was the warning, proof that anonymity was gone, that the distance between observer and intruder no longer existed. And when the window closed on its own a few seconds later, leaving no trace behind, the silence that followed felt heavier than any alarm ever could. The moment the message disappeared, instinct kicked in. Not curiosity, not confidence, just the raw need to get out. He started disconnecting layers fast, killing sessions, closing tunnels, rerouting traffic through backups he'd trusted for years. His fingers moved automatically while his mind raced ahead, already imagining traces being pulled together, patterns forming, a profile building somewhere he couldn't see. He wiped logs on his end, flushed memory, severed connections one by one, watching screens go dark as safeguards activated. But the relief never came, because even as he disconnected, the system responded, not aggressively, just observantly, processes ending a beat after his own, like it was confirming each move. He changed routes again, jumped locations, rebuilt the stack from scratch, yet the feeling stayed the same, that invisible pressure, the sense that leaving didn't mean escaping, only ending the conversation on his side. When he finally powered everything down, sitting in a room lit only by the fading glow of cooling monitors, the silence felt wrong, too quiet, like the pause after something has already decided what comes next. And as he stared at the dark screens, heart still pounding, one thought refused to leave his mind. He didn't know if the connection was truly broken, or if whatever had been watching him simply didn't need it anymore. He sat there, breathing still uneven, monitors dark, tools offline, but the memory of movement, awareness, and the message lingered like a shadow. And the question he couldn't shake wasn't about what he had done, but about who or what had been on the other side. Had he been watched by another hacker, by an AI so advanced it could anticipate him, or by something beyond the rules he thought governed this digital world? And the answer didn't matter as much as the feeling, the knowledge that in this line of work, confidence can disappear in an instant, that control is always an illusion, and that sometimes the observer has already become the one in charge. Now ask yourself, if you were him, would you have noticed before it was too late? Or would you still be inside thinking you were alone?
And if this story made you question everything about what's possible online, hit subscribe to uncover more tales like this. Leave a comment telling us what you would do if you realized someone was watching you, and share this with someone who thinks they're untouchable behind a screen, because the truth is, no one is ever truly invisible.